Resiliency. It's the commodity that you're given to persevere. And when you persevere, it's the trait that you're awarded in order to climb the mountain of prosperity. For Jen Hardy, she knows all about overcoming the harshest of obstacles in order to see the other side of what it truly means to live a meaningful and rewarding life. She's a podcaster, author, and community builder who is a mystifier to physicians and a collector of eclectic diseases. She was born with a disability. However, she's gone on to live and raise 7 children and celebrate her entrepreneurial spirit thanks to being exposed to a business lifestyle at the tender age of 12. She's been blogging since 2015, and she also wrote the book, The Sick Mom's Guide to Having Fun Again, in 2017. And earlier last year, she created a worldwide support group for moms who have chronic illness entitled Hardy Moms. Hardy herself is certainly an inspirational, transformational, and seismic leader who has quite the story to share. And I was lucky enough to referee a conversation between the two of us about perseverance, overcoming obstacles, and reaching for the dreams we so richly deserve and want, even if our pathway to get there isn't always smooth. It was certainly an honor to be in the presence of Hardy, and I'll give you the key and the chance to do the same. Without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you about all the ways you make a difference in the world. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. You're awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jen, I know that you are a podcaster and author and an inclusion advocate, so I'm wondering if you can tell me about what makes you so fabulous and why you're so passionate about the work that you do.
Wow. Well, I don't know what makes me fabulous, but I'm very passionate about helping people that have disabilities just have a fair place in the world, right? Just be on equal footing, because the more time that goes on and the more people I talk to, the more I realize, unfortunately, that's not the case. And so I want to be out there and help everybody so that we all have a level playing field, so everyone has an opportunity to do things just like everyone else does.
Yeah, absolutely. And to you, Jen, I'm curious to ask you, what does an inclusive and level of playing field mean to you? What's the definition of that?
Oh, you know what? Gosh, nobody's asked me. That's a really good question. Well, to me, honestly, I think that everyone should have the same opportunity to do things. It shouldn't matter what you look like or if you have a disability or health condition or whatever, what that is, color, race, religion, whatever. I think we should all, if we're all up to do a job or to do something, we should all have the same opportunity, right? Regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jen, I'm a big believer in diversity of perspective and the power that can bring to you both in business and in life. So, tell me, when you look at the term diversity of perspective, what comes to mind for you?
Diversity of perspective. Well, I think, depending on where we come from and what family or group or culture that we're born into, we're going to have a different perspective, right? And so there's going to be a diverse group of perspectives in any mix of peoples, right? Because we're all going to come from a different place.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dad, you tell me that you're a collector of electronic diseases and a mystifier of doctors and physicians. So tell me about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
So, yeah, I am definitely a collector of eclectic diseases. As a young child, I had a hard time doing the things that other people my age can do, but everybody just kept telling me that I was fine and I was just lazy. But, I don't know what 12-year-old kid that's on a sports team begs to be taken off the field because they're lazy. That's just embarrassing, right? But it turns out I have muscular dystrophy, but nobody knew that. And I have asthma. And so when I would run, my lungs would burn and I was in so much pain, and I didn't have the strength because of the muscular dystrophy to do what other people did, but I was always treated poorly because people just kept saying that I was pretending. And then as I got older and my things got worse, I would go to doctor after doctor, and because my things don't, there's no test for muscular dystrophy, right? It's not like, oh, your red blood cell count is low or whatever. And I also have myasthenia gravis, which is also a rare disease. And so I fought, for about 20 years to get diagnosed with anything. And the doctors just kept making me think that I was crazy or it was all in my head. And then I was saying, well, then if you think I'm crazy, treat me for that. Like, just help me somehow. And it took going to about dozens of doctors to get somebody to finally pay attention and really do the deep digging that it took to find out all the things that were going on with my body.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, as you know from doing your research on me, I also have cerebral palsy. I was born with that when I was an infant. So I was born with CP. And, at 9 years old, Jen, I was told that I wouldn't be able to walk without assistance for the duration of my life. And I know that we have a bond on the fact that inclusion should be a right given to all people. So when you think of the term perseverance and resilience, I'm curious, what do you think of, Jen?
Honestly, you know what? Someone like you who says, I have this thing, and other people might have told me that I can't do X, Y, and Z, but that does not mean I can't do X, Y, and Z, right? I'm going to have a podcast. I'm going to spread the word. You're what, top 5% of podcasters, something like that, like worldwide. Like, look at you, all the things that you're doing, and you're bringing all these different people in, and they don't necessarily have disabilities or whatever, and you're educating them, and you're sharing our vision with the world that everybody can do things. So I love what you're doing. I think you're a great example, honestly.
Well, I appreciate the kind compliment, and just picking up on that sort of notion, what do you think it takes to overcome obstacles and really fight for the things that you would consider prosperity? So what do you think is your own definition of prosperity, and what does it mean to you to overcome obstacles?
Wow, that is a good question. Okay, so to me, prosperity would be not necessarily like being super wealthy or living in a mansion, or to me, it's being comfortable, not worrying about where my food is coming from and whether I have housing, right? And living a life knowing that you don't have to worry about those kind of things, and having people who love me around me. I think if I am in that position, I feel prosperous. And I think to overcome, you have to have some belief that you can get there. So other people might not believe that you can get there, but as long as you believe it and keep moving towards that goal, even if you take a few steps forwards and then a few steps back, as long as you keep trying to move forwards and getting there, you can overcome the obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Jen, that you've been around business since you were 12 years old when your parents first exposed you to business. So tell me about your background in business, and why do you think business is so important to sort of moving the needle of progress forward in society?
Well, so it was interesting. My dad had a business at home, and we're talking like back in the 80s, right? When people didn't really have a home office for the most part, and everyone else kind of thought it was weird. And then when I got old enough to work, I had a really hard time getting up in the morning and working for 8 hours. And part of that was my body, right? But I couldn't figure out why I was struggling so hard. And then I realized, my dad had this freedom that I didn't have when I worked for somebody else. And I just realized a few years ago, that is what I was after. And I think, especially for people with disabilities, if we can start our own business, we can set our own hours, and we can work when our bodies allow us to, right? Because like my body works, I do better later in the day. My body does not like to move in the morning. So it really helps me overcome the difficulties I have at work to be able to have my own business.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with getting some extra Z's in the morning. Sometimes, Jen, I have to remind myself of that. I'm an early bird, and my mother always tells me that I need my beauty rest, and I'm not so fabulous if I don't get sleep, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And Jen, I'm also curious to ask you about being a mom. I know that you have experience with with 7 kids. So tell me about being a mom, and what does that mean to you, and how important do you think that role is in your life?
Honestly, it is the most important role in my life. For me, in fact, for the first 30 years I was a mom, that was like my whole entire focus was my kids and just trying to raise good people in a crazy world, right? And it's been interesting with my health. I've spent a lot of time in bed and in the hospital because of the way my body is, but it's just made me get a little creative with my parenting, learn how to do a lot more things from bed. There was actually a time when I couldn't walk at all. There was 4 months where I was basically stuck in bed or at the doctor, and we had camp chairs around my bed in my bedroom, and my kids' friends would come over and they'd all hang out in there. And people could have looked at it as one of the hardest parts of my life, but actually it was a great time because we really got to focus on what was important. And so, yeah, that's definitely one of the most important things in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, I know you've been blogging since 2015. I know you've written a book, and you have your own podcast. Between being a mom of 7 kids and doing all the work that you do, I'm surprised you penciled me in this afternoon. But all kidding aside, tell me about the blog, the podcast, and why you thought writing a book was so important.
Well, so back in 2014, I got really sick. I had a 2 and a 4-year-old and 5 teenagers. And I spent 6 different weeks in the hospital, and I had 20 different day-long infusions at home. And so I was laying down a lot, right? Trying to figure out how I could be a mom, because I had been this homeschooling mom and we had done all these things, and suddenly I couldn't. And so I went to the internet to try to find help, and there was no help. There was a lot of people complaining and whining about, they couldn't do this or they couldn't do that, or they were in pain, but nobody had solutions. And so I kept telling my husband, I need to find these solutions. And he said, well, if it's not out there, then I think it's your job to create it. So that's when I started the blog. And then I wrote the book. It's called The Sick Mom's Guide to Having Fun Again. If I can do it, you can too. So that other moms that are in that same place can get the book, and then there's 100 things in there that you can do with your kids, 50 of them if you can't even get off the couch, so that they've got options and ways to stay connected with their family even when they're feeling like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know last year you launched a worldwide support group for moms who are struggling with chronic illness, which are entitled Hardy Moms at hardymoms.com. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about it, its mission, and why it's so vitally important.
So I think, it's important for everybody to have a community that they feel like they fit in, right? And so that you can just talk and be open and honest. And I had started the group on Facebook, but personally for me, I value my privacy. And so I didn't want to invite people in there to share their health, especially with women, we've got some health things we might not want the whole world to know about, and so I thought it would be really good to have a private group where we can get together and we can just talk about what is it really like, how are these things really affecting us, and talk about some personal issues, but outside of social media, so everyone knows, your secrets are safe there and it's all private. So right now it's very small. And we're just slowly growing, and that's fine because we don't need a whole bunch of people there, just a few people that really get what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, I'm also curious to ask you your definition of women's empowerment and what it means to you to empower women on a grander scale.
Honestly, at this point, I think to me, it just means more equality with men, right? Like if a man and a woman have a job, they get equal pay or they have equal opportunity to get it. I think, and it kind of goes back to your first question, right? About inclusion and diversity. And I think it shouldn't matter what your skin color is or whether you're a guy or a girl, or, we should all have the same opportunities no matter what. And I honestly don't understand why that's not a thing. I really don't. It's very confusing.
Yeah, it's all about breaking down those barriers towards inclusion, isn't it?
It is. It is. It just, I don't know. And being, okay, so being a man of color, like the more I hear, the more people I talk to, being a person of color is also, it's harder to get decent medical care. And I think that definitely should not be a thing. I don't know. I just don't understand it. But I think for me, that would be one of my number one things is healthcare and everyone having equal opportunity and being treated well, no matter what the situation is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jen, I'll let you know a little secret. So I actually live here in Canada, and of course, the Canadian healthcare system is a lot different than what you experience in America. And I know that universal health care is something that was introduced by President Obama in his latter days in office, but I know it's a work in progress. And to answer your question, especially when you have a disability and you're a person of color, it's those equities are something that we have to continue to work on. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you live your life by a model of not existing, but loving your life again through your own chronic illness. So tell me, how do you go from sort of knowing that you have a chronic illness and loving your life again despite the circumstances that you've been dealt?
Well, for me, I think, when you find out you have a chronic illness, a lot of times it's kind of like you kind of go through the stages that you would go through of death sometimes, right? Because you're in shock and you're in denial, and then you kind of grieve. And I think it's good to let yourself grieve, but then you need to stop. You need to stop grieving and stop looking at the negative parts. And for me, what really made the change was when I stopped thinking all the time about what I couldn't do and what my symptoms were. Because when I focused on, this hurts or that hurts, or I can't do this or I can't do that, that became my life, right? I was a chronically ill person instead of I am a person who happens to have a chronic illness, right? So I focus on all the things now that I can do, and I feel so much better. And so I focus on what I can do and I do the things I can do. And if other people are doing things I can't, that's okay. I'm happy for them. And then I move on to the thing that I can do and enjoy.
Yeah, and I know one of your missions in life is to spread that same message to millions of moms around the world who feel that they have no hope, and help them live the life that they sort of intended to or dreamed of living. So, and get them off the couch and get living again. So, walk me through that process and how it works.
Well, I think, the first thing, like I said, is to just take your focus off of yourself and off of your can'ts, right? And think about what you can do. And especially as a mom, I think, if you wallow in that self-pity, that is definitely not helping your children. And so we have to, really think, okay, if I've made the choice to be a mom and I've got these kids, what can I do to be the best parent and teach them how to live their life the best that they can? So as a mom, I'm going to find the things I can do and I can do with them. And we're going to focus on the more positive aspects. And sure, there's some bad days. And, I do a thing called a pity party, and I'll do it with my kids too, where we'll actually set a timer for a minute and we just whine and moan and gripe about whatever that thing is. But then when the timer beeps, we're done and we move forward in a positive direction. So I encourage moms to do that too. Just let it out and get it out and then move on.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people that the only level of expectations you have to meet is your own, and the only people that really care about your problems is you. So, it takes more energy to be angry than it does to be happy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'm fascinated to ask you about parenting today, and how do you think it's really evolved? Because parenting when I was younger or when you were younger is significantly different today, especially with social media and all the devices that are out there to get children's attention. So I'm curious, when you look at successful parenting, what do you think is the recipe to get that done?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's interesting because I've got 5 adult kids that were raised with that before everyone had a cell phone in their hand, right? And so now I've got an 11 and 13-year-old at home. And I think the number one priority is to as a parent, put your own devices down. I think it's so easy for parents to get sucked into this thing where they have to stare at their phone all the time and ignore their children. I think, honestly, that's the number one issue that I see. And number 2, get those things out of your kids' hands. They have to, they have to be engaged to some level, right? Like doing schoolwork on the computer, and social media is how a lot of people communicate, but strong limits on those things, I really think. And spending time as a family, eat your meals together, play board games or things like that together, and have that face time with other humans that we're really losing. These kids are losing out so much by staring at those screens 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think authentic, a human connection goes a long way, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jen, since you have experienced your life with a disabilities, I feel comfortable asking you this question. One of the reasons that I wanted to start this podcast is, social isolation is a big issue that I tend to deal with and work through myself. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation was to, or start this podcast was to have conversations that move the needle of progress forward. So I'm curious, how as a parent do you make sure, or how personally do you make sure that you battle the social isolation and making sure that you don't fall in those pitfalls as well?
It's not easy. I'll tell you, especially because now not only do I have disabilities, but I'm technically an older parent, right? Because I'm in my 50s and I've got an 11-year-old. And it's really hard to make friends, honestly, because a lot of the people that have kids my kids' age, they're younger, but they're active, right? They want to go for walks, they want to go hiking, they want to go spend the day at, say, walking around an amusement park. And I can't do those things. But when people look at me, they think I look fine. And so I'm just making excuses because they don't understand. And so it's been really hard not being isolated. We just keep showing up. I guess that's the secret. We find, we'll find a group and we show up. And if it's not a good fit, we'll find another group and we just keep going. In fact, we just found a homeschool group where we really feel like we fit in. And it's been a long time coming and it's so nice. But I think that's the secret is don't give up just because one or two things don't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has their favorite flavor of ice cream, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And there's always that one guy. Don't let that one guy stop you.
Well, yeah, it's the same when people deny the request to come on this podcast. It's the same approach that I take to finding other people to talk to. One no is an opportunity for somebody else to say yes, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. And, Jen, my final question for you has to do with your own personal and professional legacy and how you want that to be defined.
Oh, wow. You've got great questions.
Well, thank you.
I want to write that down and ask all of my guests that same question. I mean, it sounds really trite, but I would like to leave the world in a better place than I found it when I was, and hopefully my children, at least a couple of them, will take on that same goal. And in writing the books, I hope that I can make a few people's lives better by the work that I've done.
Yeah, it's all about paying it forward, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I've had a few people in my life who have really come up and held my hand and helped me get to where I really wanted to go. And I want to be that guy for some other people as well.
Yeah, that's very, very important. And finally, Jen, tell me if people want to get connected with the good work that you do, what's the best way they can do that?
Okay, hardymom.com, HARDYMOM.com.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you for the good work that you do to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion forward, and really taking the time to engage in conversation with me about the importance of inclusion for all people. Your work in the space and time on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Well, I want to thank you for letting me be here. It has been amazing to talk to you. And I just want you to know you are one of my heroes. You really are. I love what you do. I just cannot wait to hear what you've got coming out in the future. So I'm very excited to watch you. You're great. So thanks.